Welcome to a true story from the history of the Cripple Creek Mining District. This video is copyright 2026 by Thomas Saunders. In early February 1898, contractor Dunphy of the Florence and Cripple Creek Railroad put together a construction crew of several men to work on the new F and CC tracks in Victor, Colorado. At that time, Victor had a population of perhaps 8,000 people, compared to maybe 20,000 in Cripple Creek. On Friday night, February 4th, 1898, 4 members of Dunphy's crew arrived in Victor with the intention of hitting several of the saloons in town. James Connors, 36, Thomas Quinn, 32, Henry Shorty Haley, 40, and Pat Dublin McAuliffe had no history of trouble with the police force of Victor or the district as a whole. The 4 visited a few of the bars in Victor and finally ended up in the Monarch Saloon. Around 2 a.m., Connors and McAuliffe started arguing. The men were getting very loud with a lot of pushing and shoving. Eventually, Quinn and Haley got involved and the 4 left the Monarch. Once out on 3rd Street, the fight escalated. When town police officer Reeder found the men fighting, he arrested all 4. As he was walking them to the jail, 3 of the men went along quietly, but Connors was still in a fighting mood. He swore at Reeder, threatening him, and reached for the officer's revolver. Reeder knocked him down. Getting up, Connors again reached for the revolver, and again Reeder knocked him down. Once at the jail, Officer Reeder put Connors in cell 3 in the back of the jail. Since he was still acting out, he put the other 3 men in the cell in front that they called the bullpen. The Victor jail was little more than a large shed. It was located on East Victor Avenue, the main street in town running east and west. About 30 feet long and 20 feet wide, the jail was built of layers of pitch pine planks spiked together. Pitch pine is a type of pine favored by railroads and for other types of outdoor construction because the very high resin content naturally protects the wood from rot. The jail had a corridor down the middle which led from the entrance to a small room at the back. There were 2 cells on each side of the corridor. At the time, Victor employed no jailer. During their shifts, if necessary, the police officers just locked up their prisoners and returned to their rounds of the town, occasionally checking back on the prisoners in the jail. That early morning of February 5th, Officer Reeder searched the men and found no matches. There was no fire in the wood stove. During his shift, Reeder checked on the prisoners several times. They were yelling all night. He last checked at 4:30 a.m., and all was fine. At 6 a.m., Reeder was in the Monarch Saloon when someone ran in and told him that there was a fire at the jail. Leaving the Monarch, he asked men on the street to turn in a fire alarm and ran to the jail to release the prisoners. At the jail, Reeder unlocked and opened the door, but flames and thick smoke drove him back. The fire department arrived soon after. A crowd gathered at the fire, but could do nothing to help. They watched horrified and sickened as the prisoners in the jail screamed and begged for help. The prisoners died as the jail burned before their eyes. Firemen arrived and fought the fire for almost an hour. Pitch pine with its resin content catches fire quickly and burns very hot. Officer J.H. Burnham got to the jail not long after the fire department and helped as much as he could. Even after the fire was out, no one could enter the jail because it was full of heavy smoke. Eventually, Burnham put his handkerchief over his mouth and entered the jail, wading through the heavy smoke to open the bullpen door. The bodies of the 3 men in the bullpen were taken outside. Though blackened and damaged by smoke and heat, and nearly unrecognizable, they were not badly burnt. It was soon discovered that McAuliffe was still alive. He was taken to the nearby offices of the Victor Record newspaper and a doctor sent for. Initially, it was thought that he would not live. About 8 a.m., Burnham finally was able to get to cell 3 in the back of the jail and unlock it. That area of the jail was heavily damaged by the fire. The body of Connors was found, badly burned. The entire interior of the jail was damaged from the fire and smoke, but it was quickly determined from the condition of the area and of Connor's body that the fire had started in his cell. There were reports in the papers that Connors had shredded his bedding to start the fire. Other reports speculated the fire might have started by a spark from his pipe. Coroner Hallett arrived from Cripple Creek at 1 that afternoon, and by 3:30 had impaneled a coroner's jury of 6 men. The jury visited the jail and inspected cell 3, then went to Hunt's undertaking parlors. They listened to testimony from police officers, firemen, and several other witnesses, and at 7 p.m. returned their verdict. They found that the men lost their lives by suffocation, which today we would call smoke inhalation. They also found that the fire was started by James Connors. In addition, they found the police derelict in their duty for not checking the jail more often when prisoners were locked up. None of the men had been in the district long, nor were they well known. James Connors was survived by a widow and children living in West Detroit, Michigan. Thomas Quinn had been in the district 2 weeks. He was from Philadelphia, where his parents still live. Henry Haley had been in the district for some time, but was still relatively unknown. An autopsy was performed on Connors and found that his death was due to suffocation. This quieted a rumor that he had been murdered, and the jail burned down to hide the evidence. Many other rumors were circulating, including one that Officer Reeder had known the jail was on fire and just left it burn. On February 8th, a town council meeting was held, and 4 of the 6 men on the police force were suspended pending a hearing. Chief of Police and Marshal Armstrong, Night Marshal Rowan, and Officers B.C. Wolf and Phil Fitzpatrick were all suspended pending hearings. A new marshal was appointed at the same meeting. The next day, charges were dropped against Phil Fitzpatrick. Some thought it odd that Officer Reeder, who arrested and locked up the men, was not suspended. An editorial in the Victor Record the day after the fire speculated that the city council were responsible for the deaths, since they wouldn't hire jailers. It mentioned that the police had their hands full just keeping the peace, and their responsibility should end once the prisoners were incarcerated. A joint funeral was held for the 3 victims of the fire on the afternoon of February 10th, 1898. Many of the folks of Victor gathered at Hunt's undertaking parlors to pay their respects to these men who only few knew in life. Reverend Father Downing conducted graveside services for the 3, who were buried in adjacent graves in the Victor Cemetery at the town's expense. This author has so far been unable to find the graves of the men in any current documentation of Victor's Sunnyside Cemetery. Lawsuits were brought by survivor Pat McAuliffe and by family members of the dead men, but documentation on the outcome of the suits was not found. This is the end of our video. Thanks for watching.